Pigeon FrightFest in the UK just finished up, and one of the films to come out of it is Broken Bird. It's going to be hitting theaters in limited areas very soon, but are you even going to want to search out this psychological horror? Sybilv Chamberlain is a quiet, creative soul. She works in a funeral parlor because she likes dead people and they understand her. As reality and reason slip away from Sybil and her dark desires become more and more insatiable, her fascination with the dead takes a dark and strange twist. This stars Rebecca Calder as Sybil, and she wonderfully embodies a character who has lost a certain connection with reality. Sybil experienced some issues early in her life. Now she lives some of her life through fantastical visions. When we see these, they're sort of like what Walter Mitty had in his mind, except these daydreams are more of the disturbed type. Now, Calder really creates her character to be off-putting. She's not rude or mean typically, but instead is extremely awkward, almost socially inept. And it's easy to see how she has become isolated and then dependent on her imaginary life. Now, I was impressed at how uneasy the character made me. There are scenes, especially a few as Sybil walks through this park, that the look that she has would certainly make you want to steer away from her, even though she's not disheveled or unkempt. I mean, she's well-dressed, and she presents normally, until she smiles at you, or maybe speaks. That's when the creep factor kicks in to let your survival instincts know that something is just a bit off. Now, the imagery seamlessly transitions from reality to fantasy, and at the beginning of the film, it's not easy to fully understand which is which. Now, as the story goes along, these visions take on more dreamlike aesthetics, so they are clearly delusions. Early on, though, Sybil's an unreliable narrator, convoluting our impression of her because if she can't discern what's really occurring in front of her, how can we? And there are some other characters in this who also live in a sort of dream world, or at least have moments when they're detached from reality. And this can be from stress or grief, but the story device helps to showcase how Sybil may not be so odd after all. Now, the story's slow and it's mysterious, but mysterious in the fact that the point and the purpose take quite a while to become defined. Most of the intrigue is trying to figure out what each character is working towards, but for a good chunk of the story, it's so vague that it hinders overall investment. We're introduced to a female police detective. Instantly, we know that she is dealing with something that's emotionally troubling her. And I like what this adds for the core mystery. But she has such little character development that her impact is lessened simply because all we're shown is a distraught, unreliable character who's grieving. More details do come later, and they work into creating a more distressing narrative, but this part of the story feels more like a convenience to get us toward the finale than anything created with a lot of intended weight. I mean, it's like the filmmakers knew that they wanted to get from point A to C, and just sort of tossed in B just to ease the transition. I mean, without the development and the background, this portion, it works as a connection, but it's not clever or imaginative, so instead it's just gimmicky. Now, I was surprised by some of the darkly comedic moments that are included here. Sybil, mainly through her daydreams, imagines some off-the-wall scenarios that can either make you chuckle or wince, maybe both. And these worked within the storytelling because they didn't break the tone of the scenes, and they weren't adding levity, just illustrating a darker persona that was creeping closer and closer to the surface. Now, despite the movie being 99 minutes, it did feel slow and dragging at times. I think this is mainly due to the meandering nature of the story. We're never really given a reason to care about Sybil or what she's doing. We're almost just seeing this slice of her life as she loses her grounding with reality. And while some of this does work, the majority of the storytelling is propelled by conveniences. Sybil takes a job at a mortuary run by James Fleet, who is sporting a spectacular beard, by the way. This dude, though, he has his own issues that he's working through, and by itself, it isn't necessarily unbelievable or out of the norm. But when we learn of some of his specifics, and then when these are coupled with Sybil's psychological constructs, everything just fits way too nicely so that everything then falls into place without complications. Now, I don't mind some conveniences built in just to assist in the momentum, but when almost every action is met without issue, it's way harder to believe or even get invested in. Now, I think there's a deeper and more twisted story that could be told here. Elements in Sybil's background could be delved into further, giving her more emotional depth. I mean, we're given enough to understand, but some key moments involving her visions would be so much more weighty with a more defined character. And then the story element with the detective, it is just screaming for more detail. Again, we do get enough to know what transpired in her life, but if she were to have more expansion, I think we'd see greater parallels between her and Sybil, which then craft a more complex story that ultimately becomes seriously unsettling. As it stands, the film is fine. I mean, it presents its tale with some unnerving imagery, and then a semi-demented look at a character's life, and includes twists that can be upsetting, even though they are very predictable. And the narrative then provides a solid conclusion. I just wanted less conveniences and more intricacies, along with further character establishment. In the end, though, the movie didn't deliver on its potential. There's no sex, some nudity, some profanity, and then some very gruesome violence. I give Broken Bird 2.5 out of 5 couches. So when this comes to streaming, I think it's worth checking out, just not at full price in the theater. So what thrillers or horrors are you looking forward to seeing within the coming months? Now, I'm excited for Terrifier 3 because the trailer just dropped, but I would love to know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.